do come through planning and zoning with a recommendation to city council. So based on what may happen during the month of November with the town board, you may be directed, or I may come back and make a request that you consider some draft wording. So something to keep in mind and to stay tuned for over the next month or so.
Okay. I went online and looked up some things, and there's a place in Horseshoe, North Carolina, that takes goats out and eats down, their goats, and has clearing vegetation, kudzu and such as that. And goats, was watching videos and all, and my neighbors have goats also, but goats are herd animals, and they would bring a group of goats, according to how large area. It was talking about they didn't like to be alone. They're, like I said, they're herd animals, and said they would eat 2 to 3%. Another place I saw where they eat 2% of their body weight a day. So, which that could approximately 4 pounds is what that one article said. So it would, if I guess you would have to have several of them if you were if you were wanting to clear a very large area in a short period of time, or you have to have few of them for a little longer period of time, depending on how large the area you're trying to clear.
Some of my initial thoughts and reactions to this, after reading some material online and then looking at this Knoxville ordinance, is it seems to make a lot of sense putting some kind of limits on the number of, were we to enact something like this, perhaps the number of goats per acre, obviously establishing some kind of time limits, the continuous length of time that the goats would be allowed to graze on a particular property, things of that nature. So as to protect the rights and privileges of adjoining property owners. And I think the ordinance from Tennessee begins to do that. It may not be restrictive enough for Troutman, but they're just numbers, and you can insert numbers and change those, and that's the purpose of a draft, to be able to chew over it and take it apart and put it back together again.
Yeah, and it might, maybe to get a number of what's practical, maybe we could contact that particular place that's not that far away, I don't think.
If you have a contact that you'd be willing to share with me afterward, I can reach out to.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. And now, if it's just something we would want to do in town, then it would make sense to be in the town ordinance, I think. But if it's something which wouldn't come to us, and if we want to put it in a UDO, I'm not really sure which way we want to go with that.
Neither do I.
Where is there an ordinance now that would restrict people from doing that, or is there?
The current ordinance, and I believe it's in the UDO, does not allow livestock within the town limits. I believe. I'm going from.
It's also in the code of ordinance too.
Yeah, in the code of ordinance. Yeah.
In 2 places. It just seems to me it'd be that wherever it is today, you write an exception to that and insert that within it, right?
The livestock in the UDO is allowed in rural preservation, correct?
I believe so, but for the most part, it's interesting because the UDO does define the term livestock, but through the remainder of the UDO, with 1 or 2 exceptions, it's pretty silent on the whole issue of livestock.
So maybe it is in the ordinance, then that makes more sense.
When we redid that, if I remember correctly, the guy from Stantec recommended we put it in the code of town code, if it's to do with the city, or the town, I mean. If you just wanna control it in town, that's where you should put it, and that was why I think it didn't get put in the UDO. And in the ETJ, if it's a bona fide farm, it's allowed anyway, no matter what zoning it is.
What's that?
It's not under, the UDO has no control over a bona fide farm. Zoning restrictions don't apply. So I don't know if, or we, I mean, I guess we can discuss where you, or, I mean, I'm not really sure where we need to go with this as far as, what does town council, we got a couple of people here from town council, I don't know, maybe they could help enlighten us on what it is they want us to do.
I'll just add that the question came up from a person y'all may remember from our board, Erica Martin, has a really bad kudzu problem at her properties on West Street. And it was in there, and of course, but under her direction, and us on the planning board at the time, took it out of there. That we wouldn't allow goats and hens and all that other stuff. So we removed it from there, thinking that it should go into town ordinances if it was ever done. And that, I think that's what you just said.
Yes.
But if she asked me about that, and I think somebody else had a problem with kudzu, and I said, Erica, me personally, I don't want ghosts next door to me, but I can understand if you had an issue, for temporary, and I would bring it back and ask the council. And so that's where we started that discussion last month. And so it was Erica, who was our planning board director, who has the problem now and wants to know how can we get something so she could do it legally.
Yeah.
So there, because she's got really bad. And I think if you go down West Street, you'll see a couple places with that dip. Is that where she's, and then there's kudzu on both sides of the road, and her yard is just like taking over her whole place. And she says she didn't want to spray herbicides and stuff out there because she's got little girls running around in the yard.
Okay.
And that's why she asked that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And there's several places in town that have a bad
And evidently,
kudzu
I guess
problem.
goats, I didn't know that. I didn't know what kudzu was. I'm sorry, I'm not from this area originally, but and I found goats will eat this stuff up pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyhow, I brought it back to the council, and looking at if for a temporary fix, I didn't have a problem. That's what, and we're come out, and I think that's what Jonathan's asking, should it be, because it wasn't in the code of ordinances, it was in the UDO, and we removed it when we updated the code of ordinances, 2 years ago, and we took all that livestock stuff out of there.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be added back to the code of ordinances and didn't get put, it never got done.
And so that's where the thing came up.
I think the intention was that, because it allowed, hens, it allowed some livestock like the hens and so forth, and perhaps the thought was at the time that any permanent location of livestock within the town limits would be prohibited, since we are growing as we are. But the temporary location of livestock, such as in this case goats, and it'd be particularly related to goats on a temporary basis, perhaps not to exceed 2 weeks, not to exceed 4 per acre, and would be kept under senatorial type of conditions, this sort of thing, and we wanted it to go to planning and zoning. It could be just typically an ordinance thing, but since it is in the UDO, not mentioned in the UDO, we thought about continuing to address it in the UDO. It had been addressed in the past. As you correctly put a while ago, the UDO covers inside and within DTJ. Ordinances only cover within town limits. So we were addressing it, but it can certainly be handled either way. Jonathan had mentioned that, the appropriateness of being in the UDO perhaps may not be there because it's a land use matter. This could be or could not be construed as a land use matter, allowing, say, goats on a temporary level. It could be handled either way. So, you folks, want to recommend to us what you think. We'll take it under advisement and go from there, whether to handle it under the UDO or strictly the code of ordinances. and take it and just leave the UDO as is, and let strictly, well, I say code of ordinances, you know, we could make exception to code of ordinances to allow just goats on a temporary basis, and leave the UDO as is concerning all other livestock. So, I mean, that's, again, we're looking to you guys for, advice.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and that was something else I watched several videos and different things about goats, and it said if you had green, like, I guess, green vegetation, you could actually keep 6 goats per acre, and they could eat that, I guess, all summer. Which means, it sounds like you have to put more than that per acre. You have to put a number that can eat that much in a length of time, which is something we don't really know what is unless we talk to someone who does that. Which I'll get you that number. I'll have to look it up, but I can find it.
Sure, appreciate it.
And that might help, and because you don't want them just to, if you're not wanting them to stay there, you gotta put enough in there for a short period of time. Of course, I realize if it's a lot, it's probably not the whole acreage that has the problem.
And Erica's lot's probably a lot less than a half acre, maybe a quarter of an acre, is just an example of what you're going with.
Yeah, so if 4 per acre, one wouldn't be able to eat that in a 2-week period. Not from what I was seeing them, when they eat 4 pounds a day, approximately.
So
Right, and-
not knowing exactly where to start, would it be worth making a case study of Erica's property? I mean, she's got the experience with it, would know
This,
kind of how.
you know,
it
we're
got
referring to
done.
one, but again, if this is passed, it covers, you know, all in town, so we need to look beyond the one applicant,
I understand.
in
I
this
just-
situation.
I
And,
was just saying you make a case study of it, and if you start with your recommendation, right? If you said 4 per acre and they can only be there 2 weeks, and if she starts out with that and it hasn't made a dent, then we know that that's not where you want to start, right?
yeah, and, you know, the 4 per acre was something that was discussed sometime in the past, before when we, had this discussion probably back in 2014, when it was still allowed, in the current UDO at that time. And again, you know, when you were talking about your research a while ago, and that's a thought that came to mind, is that this is something that, you know, either this body or we as a council would have to delve into to see, rather than just shoot from the hip and come up with a number that may not even be effective, and have to go back and change again. Perhaps if you folks would like to do some research on that and come back with a recommendation of 6 goats, 8 goats, you know, over a certain period of time. You know, goats have a tendency to smell. As I say, we want to do it in such a way that it's not offensive to surrounding neighbors. And then we have to, you know, backtrack on what we've done, because it's become an unsanitary type thing. So, you know, if you, this body would be interested to maybe do a little research, as he just mentioned, and if you want to use that one property as a case study, that's fine. But come back and you know, give us some choices, or recommend to leave things as they are. Don't make any changes. If you would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, I think it's a good idea. It's instead of using chemicals. I think she has I believe there's a creek over there where.
Yes, there is.
So that's something else you have to be mindful of as far as you spraying chemicals and her children, and if you got pets and that sort of thing. So I think it's a good thing. Just needs to be, like you said, researched. We really don't know enough to make any recommendations.
So the other question I would have, and maybe it's for people that are interested in doing it like Erica, what would be the solution for temporarily containing the goats?
They use electric fences and what I saw.
So she's gonna hire a company that's gonna put in an electric fence temporarily and then provide the goats? and
Well,
they
you
pull
can,
them back
you,
up, or
you
what?
could do it yourself, but there are companies that come out and actually do that.
Yeah.
I don't know how many they are, but I know I found that, well, there's several I know, but that one in particular that I'm sure we could reach out to and find out they put up a temporary electric fence and keep
I'm
them in.
assuming she's not gonna buy goats for 2 weeks and then turn around and sell them.
No, I wouldn't think so.
No, you can rent them.
Yeah. Can you? Okay.
It's a market for used.
Yeah,
goats.
I'm just wondering what that fence looks like, and it probably, if it's gonna be temporary use, needs to be mentioned in whatever language we come up with to say this is allowed for X amount of time. Just to make sure
Right.
people aren't putting in, 8-foot chain link fences or whatever, I don't know what it means.
Yeah, it's a temporary electric fence is what they normally use.
The
I
front
did
yard
see
is
some.
chain link fence all the way around it,
Oh,
4 foot high or so, all the way around all around the back whole, complete backyard. It was fenced.
Yeah, you would probably
that's
still have to put electric wire or they'd climb it probably.
Climb or push it.
Yeah, but, I mean, we can find out what they normally do, and that's what I've seen on what I was watching. And they did have some woven fences, look like a temporary fence also, but that wasn't around here.
That's what we're asking. Again, we're not sure what's gonna come from you folks, but we're asking you to look into it. If it takes a couple of meetings to come up with a recommendation, so be it. But we're just asking that you look at that and come back with a recommendation, or several, to give us options, what have you, for us to look at. And again, as I say, we may end up, changing, and if your recommendation is to leave it as is, that may be. So again, we're just asking, it's not something that we need tonight. Over the course of several meetings, if you want to discuss it, do research before you actually come up with a formal recommendation to us, that's acceptable.
Yes, I think we should do that.
That's fine.
Jonathan, the other thing I was concerned about is having the goats won't eradicate the kudzu. So even though you might have the goats temporary for 2 weeks, how many times in a year can I have goats for 2 weeks?
Good question.
Because the kudzu is going to always be an issue. And so we would have to look at the repetition of the request as well, not as in addition to the duration of the request.
Yeah, that's correct, because they're not gonna kill it in 2 weeks.
No.
As she said, kudzu grows more than an inch a day at times during the growing season, so Karen is certainly right. It will come back, and it's something that will have to be repeated several times during the season. But there again, that's part of what we're asking you folks to advise us on, if you would, please.
Okay.
Also, when we're doing the research, you're talking about temporary fence. We have to research, does a company gonna come out and put up a fence and take it down, or, it's almost like getting a security system. They're gonna want you to sign up for 6 months or a year or something.
But we'll have to find out, but that particular company that I was looking at, I'm pretty sure they come out and put it
Put it
up.
up, take it down, 2 weeks.
Yeah. For however long duration it takes, I'm not sure what it is. I think they put enough in there at one time to clean it up pretty quick, is the idea. Okay, I'll get with you, and I guess we all could research into it and look at it and come back together and see what we find. Is there, you mentioned something about hens. Is there any interest in that also? Hens?
If that's one of your recommendations, sure, yes.
No, I'm sure we don't want roosters, but
Excuse me?
I'm sure we don't want any roosters.
No,
But
as far as I'm concerned, it's just to do with temporary placement of goats.
no, I mean also hens. You mentioned something about, and we had talked about that a long time ago when we were redoing the UDO.
Yeah,
And
when
you
we
just
took it
mentioned-
out, yeah.
You mentioned something about hens.
Hens, yes, that was allowed at one time, yes.
Is that something?
No,
Okay.
no. The council's just concentrating on temporary placement of goats.
Okay. All right.
And again, what you folks
Okay.
recommend to us.
All right. We'll just, I guess, everybody's homework is to kind of research this and come back and see what, and I'll give Jonathan that information, and you can contact them and see what they say, or I can call them, or, but I'll give it to you. And we may both talk to them, I don't know. Okay. Other business. Town council planning and zoning, recent action and discussion updates. Jonathan?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wanted to report on some recent town council decisions, many of which came through the Planning and Zoning Board to sort of bring you up to speed on a number of these issues. And I did have a couple other sort of announcement issues I wanted to share with the board as well, but I'll go through the town council first. September 10th was a busy evening, business evening for the town council. You may recall at your September business meeting here, there were quite a number of rezoning requests and other related issues that ended up going to town council. One of the items was Mr. Norman's property on Trackside Road. You may recall that approximately 3 years ago, Erica issued a notice to Mr. Norman that he would not be allowed to obtain local permits and approvals until he sought and obtained approval to rectify his non-compliant property situation over there. I'm pleased to report a couple things. Number one, I worked with Mr. Norman's site engineer to develop a perimeter buffering and screening plan that was presented to the town council, and they did approve it. They also approved removing the 5-year prohibition that Erica Martin had imposed on that, conditioned upon his completion of the improvements in the installation of the planting material in that recommended perimeter screening plan within 90 days of this September 10th meeting. So we're looking at that and watching that carefully. I also was able to successfully obtain from Mr. Norman's site engineer a site plan, and I'm in the early stages of absorbing that and reviewing that, and I'll be working with the applicant on finding some strategies to resolve the remainder of the situation. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're on the right track there. Town council also approved 2 annexations. One was for the Smith Village development, and the other was for the Brown property, which was a portion of the Calvin Creek development property. Town council also approved the proposed facade design for the Redwood Troutman apartment complex at their September 10th meeting. Finally, town council did approve the 2 rezonings that the Planning and Zoning Board looked at for the Smith Village development. Have a little footnote on that I feel obligated to share with the board here tonight. And it's come to staff's attention that the town council may not have been fully cognizant of the recommended additional conditions that the Planning and Zoning Board had recommended be placed on the Smith Village conditional rezoning. We are going to be working up some potential strategies associated with that oversight, one of which is to double down on our efforts to ensure that anything that leaves this body to go to the town council that has conditions attached to it that were not initially attached by the developer are successfully and effectively conveyed to the town council. I take personal responsibility for this oversight. I don't want to make excuses for myself, but this all occurred about my second week here on the job, and I was pretty overwhelmed by it. And I can assure you that for the remainder of my time here, I'm not going to allow that to happen again. So that's the town council activities over the last month or so. I should also add that there weren't any planning matters on the October 10th agenda, with the exception of the discussion about the potential temporary use of goats for invasive species, and we already talked about that. Couple other things that I wanted to bring to your attention. There was something called the Troutman Alternative Study, and I know a number of you, as well as a number of town council members, were involved in an advisory capacity on an advisory council for this work that commenced, I believe, about a year and a half ago, to look at the various transportation alternatives that might be available as an alternative to the widening of Main Street through the middle of town. The consultant, Stantec Consulting, was in the final stages of finalizing this work when the pandemic hit, and the whole thing was more or less, from what I understand, put on hold. I think it's a good time right now, and so do others within the organization, to put the train back on the track and look at the product work to date, and to seek some sort of completion and closure on this project. What we are proposing is to have the consultant host a Zoom meeting with the advisory committee sometime over the next week and a half to 2 weeks. And I'll be reaching out to the advisory committee members within the next day or so to try to nail down a time and a date to hold that. I think what we're tentatively looking towards is coming back and having some kind of presentation of the work product to the Planning and Zoning Board at next month's or the November meeting. And I don't know right now if that would be an in-person presentation by the consultant or something remote. We've still got to work out those details. If the Planning and Zoning Board is so inclined to forward this to the town board for their consideration, we could have this in front of the town board as early as their December 10th town board meeting for consideration, potential adoption or acceptance. So that's another thing you can sort of look forward to in the months to come. Finally, I think from time to time we've all heard over the last 18 months or so about the state's statute recodification of the planning and zoning laws. A lot of people, myself included, are referring to this as the 160D. What is happening is that the General Assembly has recodified all the planning and zoning laws. Pretty much were included in sections 160A through 160C. They've consolidated those, or in the process of those, into a new section known as 160D, which will require all the municipalities across the state to adjust their local codes and ordinances pertaining to planning and zoning to comply with and align with the new 160D requirements. We have a contract, the town has a contract with the Central Carolina Council of Governments to come up with a kind of a plan of attack and some recommended changes to our UDO to bring us in compliance with 160D. One of the elements of that contract is to bring the staff from the Central Carolina COG into the planning and zoning meeting and into the town council meeting and to provide updates and status reports on this work. And both George and I, George before I got here and I since I've been here, have sort of been deferring this a little bit until we got a little bit further down the road in terms of their work product. And I think we're getting to the point real soon that there will be a work product that is probably appropriate to share with both of the boards. And I'd like to begin thinking about having those presentations scheduled to both the Planning and Zoning Board and the Town Board sometime within the next couple of months or so. So that's another thing that is kind of on the horizon. I'm kind of out of breath from talking. If anybody has any questions about any of this, I'd be happy to try to.
Is there a time frame that we have to be in compliance with that?
Yes, there is. It's next July 1st of 2021. That was changed at least once, by the way, because of the pandemic by the General Assembly.
Is that a lot? Is it a lot of work to get to that point, or is it a little bit? Or is that a hard question to answer?
I want to say it's probably going to be a lot of work because if I say it's going to be a little work, I tend to underestimate the amount of work. My wife keeps telling me that when I go out and do yard work. How much work is there outside to do today? And I say, oh, there's a little, and then I end up spending all weekend out there. But so I'll say it's probably more than a little.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I'm not trying to be elusive, but I've never gone through this kind of process before, so I honestly don't know what it's going to entail. I have asked the COG the following question. I said, from your experience, I said, in peer communities across the state, and they're doing this work for a number of communities across the Charlotte region. I said, are there towns that are considering kind of nibbling at the apple a little bit by going in every month doing a few relatively minor changes to their UDO, or are they just tearing the bandage off all at once and getting it all done at once? And I received a definite, people are talking about doing it all at once rather than trying to do it a little bit at a time.
Okay. And is this something we could actually go look at if we wanted to, or is it still in process?
Right now, it's still in process. I think within the next probably month to 6 weeks or so, there will be enough substance that I could ask the COG staff to come in and actually present where they are right now, or where they will be by then.
I guess what I meant is the state, do they have their part of it? Is it completed as far as do they know what it is that's required, or are that still changing?
Absolutely, they know. They have the new 160D statute all composed and completed. I know the School of Government has done quite a bit of work on providing education material. I remember actually going to a day-long seminar with George back right before the pandemic hit back in February, sponsored by the state, and it was a comprehensive overview of the changes that are going to be required and prescribed by the new statutes. It's really a matter of going line by line, paragraph by paragraph with the new statutes with our UDO opened side by side, just say, oop, this has to be changed over here to comply with this, you know, to align and comply and be consistent with.
Oh, wow, that's gonna be fun. Okay, well, keep us updated on that.
I
And,
sure will.
Item B, Planning and Zoning Board meeting schedule for the remainder of 2020. I'll now turn it over to Kim.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't talk with this mask. All right, looking at the next 2 months for November and December, Planning Board falls on the week of Thanksgiving. So you're looking at the 23rd for the regular meeting date. December, the Planning and Zoning Board falls on Monday after Christmas on Friday, and then 2 days before New Year's. So my question is, do we want to reschedule these to a different date? Do you want to cancel one or both, or what would be your pleasure?
The Thanksgiving one, what, if we moved it up a week, would that,
Can do that.
or was that,
I think that would be better for me at least.
Everybody good?
Do you have any idea how much we're gonna have? Aren't these things ridiculous? Do we have any idea how much we're gonna have to discuss at that meeting? Or maybe take a look at it 2 weeks?
We can. If we don't get anything in,
I mean, we have nothing now, right, that we know of?
nothing's
So if we get
right
nothing,
now,
we-
right?
Nothing is pending right now.
Other than, unless you want to discuss goats.
The alternative study and perhaps the goat situation.
yes, Southwest bypass alternative study, if that can be, I don't know if that'll be, will it be ready by, we push it up a week?
It might be tight. I'm thinking that, just off the top of my head, I think it would be doable if we would push it to the 16th, but I do know that we all want to get it in front of the advisory committee before bringing it to the planning and
Right.
zoning board.
Right. Or, I mean, I guess we could push it the other direction, but that's right after Thanksgiving weekend. I don't think anybody wants to probably do that then.
What if we combine a November and December meeting into one meeting, either late in November or early in December? That way it gives them time
Yeah.
on this end, it gives us time to do some research about the goats, and then if there's anything that's coming down the pike that needs to go on an agenda, we can address it at one time.
We can catch it the first week in December.
What about-
Okay, so if you're looking at December, agenda briefing is on the 7th, the town council is on the 10th.
Yeah, does that leave enough time to get it to, if we would have to do it the week, if we did it in December, we'd have to do it the first week, which Wednesday, Thursday, Friday sort of thing, to get it, and then you gotta have a little time to prepare for town council, so unless you push it to January. Town council's January.
What does council say about having a council meeting in December?
On the 10th, they'll have it. They'll have that meeting.
It's not as close to either of the holidays as the planning board.
Do you think maybe we should let us know email us or something and let us know what's,
If you want to go ahead and set that meeting for the 16th, and then we can let you know. He can contact you, or I can contact you about the
November.
agenda, and you can make that decision as chair, if you wanna meet.
Okay, is the 16th good for everybody, or? Okay, could we can tentatively put it for the 16th?
So what do you think about December,
Not having one.
canceling December?
Second.
So a motion and a second.
Is it gonna be a problem if we have something that don't make it into November that needs to be handled before?
There honestly is no way of knowing for certain. You know, that being said, something may
We
come
can
in
have a
the
call
door tomorrow.
meeting.
Yeah.
We can have a call
Call
meeting
meeting.
if that,
Okay, so you want to scratch, December's for now,
okay?
with the idea that we may have to have a called meeting?
November 16th, and cancel December. Unless I'll be,
And if we need to do that, what times would the week before Christmas work for people, or no?
You mean the 14th?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if we had to have one, that'll work.
is that good with everyone?
so we're not, are we putting this down as we're canceling it, well, we can't really cancel it yet. We could, but do you want to put it down tentatively for the 14th if we need to have it? If we don't need,
Then
if we
we'll
don't have to have it, we'll cancel
Right.
it.
Okay, so the 16th and 14th, and if don't need, cancel December's, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we may have to cancel November's if we, I mean, I don't know if we want to meet just about the goats or not.
Okay.
We can.
What does that do to your notification if you're pushing up the week?
Yeah, we'll send notification out this week.
Tomorrow.
No, not tomorrow.
Oh, practically.
We'll send it out this week. By then, we'll know.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Any comments from anyone? Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?